Hello, and welcome to the Writer's Desk. My name is Lisa Soland, and I have the privilege today of introducing to you one of my good friends and fellow playwright. He's actually referred to as the thinking man's playwright, Mr. Peter Colley.
Yeah, I was born in England at the age of 6 weeks, like so many military brats, you being one yourself.
Right.
I was whisked to some overseas air base. This one was in Germany, and spent the next sort of 4 or 5 years of my life there, where I actually learned how to speak German, which has come in handy once or twice. And then when about 5, we got posted back to north of England. Then another posting down to the south of England, the Bomber Command. Then at the age of 10, my father was again posted overseas, so we went back to Germany. And as it's very traditional in English families, when the father is serving overseas, the children are sent to a boarding school back in England.
Oh, they should have known better.
Oh, it was like fabulous.
Yes, but I understand you caused some trouble there.
I did. When I first got there, I didn't quite know how to work the system, shall we say. And I was caught misbehaving far too many times, and I was almost expelled. Luckily, my housemaster, who was the fellow behind my expulsion, was a minister in the church and believed in forgiveness and redemption. And so I threw myself on his mercy and promised I'd reform. I had no idea I was going to be, I had been that bad. Looking back, of course I was, but at the time it seemed like just small bits of mischief. Right. And besides, I knew my father would kill me if he'd found out.
Military man.
Military man, the shame, the horror. So anyway, I was given a second chance. And as I always said, I swore that I would never get caught again.
Caught again? They say that between 0 and 5, those are the developmental years. So you moved quite often during those very most important years in a person's
That's right. Yeah, there was a lot of buzzing around. And luckily, I had a twin brother. So it was like, I always had like either a playmate or an arch enemy, depending on how you look at siblings. So there was a certain consistency of environment, I suppose. Military brats, have this affinity for the arts or the theater. And I was checking up, and there was actually quite a lot of famous actors who are, military brats. I mean, let me see. I've got this little list down here.
Oh, you did. You brought a list. Oh, good.
Here's some actors and singers too. Bruce Willis, Reese Witherspoon, James Woods, Julianne Moore, Heather Locklear, Bill Cosby, Steve McQueen, and there's people like Elton John, whose father was in the RAF, just like my dad, Michael J. Fox, Malcolm McDowell, John Denver as a singer, Faye Dunaway. So, I mean, it just goes on. Chris Christopherson was one,
because they're quick at making friends, which
Right.
You have to have that ability in show business, I think.
You do.
You have to be able to make people feel at ease right away.
Exactly. And it's an itinerant life when you're in entertainment. If you're a singer, you're on the road. If you're a playwright, you're working in different spaces all the time. And it really came home to me one time when I had moved to Canada to do my master's degree. And I felt the usual culture shock. I mean, I was a European, and I was suddenly in this strange place, where everything looked different, felt different, smelled different. And after a week of feeling very disoriented, I went into a theater on the university campus. And this moment I walked backstage, I felt, oh my God, I'm home. I felt this sense of warmth, of camaraderie, that everybody understood where you were coming from. And some of my very best friends to this day are the people I met in that first few weeks.
Now, you met your wife there, didn't you?
I did. Yes, that was in my first year there, and it was wonderful. She auditioned for me. I was directing the show at that time.
And what was the show? It was a musical, right?
Yeah, it was a musical. It was called Oh, What a Lovely War, which is a fantastic show. It's a musical satire on the politics of World War I. And it mixes the musical style of comedy and singing of the period with the horrors of war. And the juxtaposition of this kind of almost a vaudeville with the shadow of death in the background, I found so compelling. I mean, I think the reason I chose it was because I was fascinated by that mixture of sort of the horror and the humor of life,
Yes.
and how wild it can become, and how dark it can become, and how the two things can be right next to each other.
Yes, and romance mixed in too.
Romance and glamour, and I've always loved history things too, which is another thing that sort of got me into it. But
Right.
it just had all of the elements that I found fascinating. And it would be curious, to do some kind of psychological test to figure out why we are drawn as writers to certain stories. But
Yes.
they draw us like magnets. I mean, there are certain stories we love to watch,
Yeah.
and there are certain stories we love to tell, and they're not necessarily the same thing.
I've always gotten from you that you've had a great admiration and love for your father and respect for him.
Right.
And
right.
I think that those feelings, I think, had something to do, didn't they, with your wanting to write the Lawrence of Arabia story?
Absolutely. It was my father who served in the Middle East with Lawrence of Arabia, actually, although at the time he didn't know because Lawrence had changed his name to T.E. Shaw. Lawrence was a very complex...
After Bernard Shaw? Did he call himself that because of his friendship?
Well, he did. He occasionally claimed that it wasn't because George wasn't happy about it. But everybody knew that was why he called himself Shaw. He really, I think, wanted to be the son of George Bernard Shaw.
I would like to be the son. I think my playwriting career would be fun.
Oh, I know. But in actual fact, he was very close to George Bernard Shaw's wife, Charlotte. And I have a feeling that in the tangled sort of psychology of that mythic character, he probably wanted more to be her son, than his.
Well, she was sort of lovely, wasn't she?
Well, she was a strong woman. The reason George Bernard Shaw married, he always admired strong women. You don't have to see Major Barbara or even, Pygmalion to know that he loved strong women.
Yes.
And I think there was something in that relationship. They exchanged hundreds of letters, that is, Lawrence of Arabia and Charlotte, over the years. It wasn't a romantic thing. Charlotte was much older, and she was a matronly kind of woman, but strong. Right. And he found in her someone he could confide his darkest thoughts to. And
he certainly had them.
He did indeed. Anybody who's read The Seven Pillars of Wisdom knows that this was one very twisted human being.
Now, the title of that project was Lawrence After Arabia?
That was the subtitle.
The subtitle.
Yeah, it was The Man in the Desert.
The Man in the Desert. That's right. You've written so many now, it's hard for me to...
I'm actually a very slow writer. When I compare my output to most writers, I'm snail-like.
Yes, but you're meticulous.
Well, what I do is I spend a lot of time reworking a project until it's just right. I spend years, like Cagney, for instance. We opened it last year. I started work on that in the late 1990s. So you're getting pretty close to a decade from the time. In fact, the Huron Country Playhouse, where it is being performed right now, was where it all began, because I had another musical of mine, a World War II musical this time, that I had written.
Right.
And it was playing at the Huron Country Playhouse. And I went to see the show one night, and then one of the actors in the show came back to me and said, "You have to write me a musical about Jimmy Cagney, because I look like Cagney, and I sing, and I dance, and I can do that whole Yankee Doodle thing." And I looked at him and said, "Sure, yeah, whatever."
He planted the seed.
But he planted the seed, and then he went to New York, and he did a lot of Broadway shows. He became, quite a big
name.
Item there.
Right.
And then he was on the national tour of The Lion King, ended up in Los Angeles for 6 or 8 months. And so while he was here, I couldn't really escape anymore. So I said, let's get this thing done. We worked on it, and it turned out to be a wonderful experience. And Bobby is performing it right now. So it just shows that in showbiz, a lot of it is once you've cast your bread upon the waters, you never know what's going to come back.